Alrighty, I think we can get started. How's the volume in the back? Okay? Alright, cool. So thanks for coming out, everybody. This is the Context Engineering Guild. I'm Matt Woodard. I'm the founder of Stage 11 Agentics. We do autonomous organizations. And we've been doing this for about 6 months. Context Engineering Guild, we meet on the weekend day closest to the new moon. And our goal here is really talking about agentic orchestration, right? So this is not the group if you want to talk about how to train a model. This is not the group for, hey, I want to install my first OpenClaw agent. This is really kind of like targeted at working engineers, or not. If you're not, you don't need any professional background to do it, but you're doing regular engineering work. You probably know what Git is. You probably know what coding agents are, and how can you like kind of push forward from there. With that said, we still have a wide range of engineers here for sure. So if I say something that you don't understand, feel free to ask Claude. Don't necessarily tune out. I'm going to try and hit a few different notes across the spec here, right? Also, like if I say something you disagree with or that you love, feel free to put your hand up. It's definitely like a really welcome contributions from the group, all that kind of a thing. So a few just like getting to know the audience questions. Who here has been to a Context Engineering Guild meetup before? Okay. And then who here is using, let's do harness questions. So who here is using Claude Code as their like primary, 51% or more of your coding? Okay, wow, fascinating. And how about Codex? How about any open weights? So Pi, OpenCode, OhmyPy? Nobody. Every month I'm hoping that will increase that stuff. It's good. I mean, I'm raising my hand for Claude Code, just to be clear. Grok build? Anyone? Cutting edge? Okay, we're going to talk about that. So let's jump right into it. So things have changed a lot, and in fact, I have exciting news for you. Since we have so many Claude Code people here, Claude Code Fable Access just got extended 51 minutes ago. So now, exactly, yes, thank you, Dario. And so the only reason you're here is because you thought you were going to run out of your Fable Access, and now you're back at it. But I think it's really interesting because a month ago, we were here and Fable had just been taken away 12 hours before, right? Like, and that was 1 month from like the US government taking this model off to now like all of this thing, and then now the current state, right, which is now we have a plethora of really high-end models. So we'll bump the size up here. So now we're in this situation where like a lot of us a month ago were really just pretty Fable-pilled or Fable Codex, and now we've kind of got this four-way race going on. And I'm really curious, like who here has used 5.6 Sol a couple times? At least. Okay? Anyone have strong opinions on their thoughts? I'm just like curious. I mean, I was using it yesterday. I don't think I'm an expert on 5.6 Sol. Love it? Hate it? Yeah.
It's really good. Great at autonomous masks.
Yeah, I agree. And your Sol and Max, or
sorry?
You were using it for, it sounds like large agentic runs type thing.
Something running on a large project with that 3 days.
Nice. Yeah. Were you using /goal or your own harness, or? Okay, yeah, nice. Okay, so there's a few different things I could say here. I think that for me, an interesting thing that I'm watching in my own pattern is that you've got your Premier model, which generally speaking, I feel like people are either 5.6 Sol or Fable as their like top level orchestrator kind of role. But what's kind of interesting is that you've got this like tier 2 implementation agent, which is this like crazy, chaotic four-way race. We've, like, Grok 4.5 is remarkably sharp. And this is the first time at the Context Engineering Guild, I think we've really been like pushing Grok as a regular implementation agent. It's quick. I was running benchmarks on it yesterday. The improvement on speed for usage on Grok 4.5 is very impressive. They have a gigantic Colossus cluster. They need to impress developer mindshare. They're willing to give you a bunch of tokens for quite cheap that are very fast. I'm really liking it actually as like doing implementation work. The other thing I would say, and like I think this wasn't out a month ago, is GLM 5.2. GLM 5.2 is fucking sharp. It is like really the first time that I'm regularly using an open weights model inside. And note these cost differences here. I did a very elaborate head-to-head build-out comparison between Opus 4.8 and GLM 5.2 3-ish weeks ago, right after all this was going on. And GLM 5.2 beat Opus 4.8 in that head-to-head. Now, there's like variables. Ultimately, I still probably prefer Opus for general use, but like, you need to update your priors on that. It's like a big deal. And then it wouldn't be CG without at least a little geopolitical commentary, in that like, that was released 48 hours after Fable was made illegal by the US government. My personal theory is that GLM 5.2 was released so that way it would demonstrate to Chinese allies that the US government didn't have a complete stranglehold on frontier level intelligence. I think that's like really interesting. I think it's underappreciated in the general Twitter discourse, because the like zeitgeist amongst our Twitter sphere was like totally dominated by Fable being illegal, and I think that like took all the oxygen out of the room. Yeah, come on in. That took all the oxygen out of the room for discussion of how sharp GLM 5.2 is. What's cool about GLM 5.2 is that unlike many of us that are using Codex or Claude Code, GLM 5.2, you're able to use that across OpenRouter, and so you can run as many agents as you want simultaneously at once, right? You're just paying API prices. I'm guessing, actually, that's a good question. Who here is, most of their work is not on a subscription plan? So it's not on a Claude Code Max 20 or whatever the equivalent is. A few corporate guys in the back, I'm assuming? Okay, interesting. I mean, yeah, because then you get into some very different dynamics if you're actually paying API prices, right? Because as we can see, basically none of us are paying this much for actual Fable tokens. And thanks to this tweet, now none of us will have to, which is amazing. And so like the whole price equation starts to get very interesting because of that. So I think that's the high level takeaway here. We've got this premier competition in between these two. I will say that like 5.6 Soul is very sharp. I'm definitely impressed. I do prefer Fable. There also are like a few horror stories floating around online. Take with a grain of salt. I do think it leans. I'm told that Ultra Code, like multi-agentic handling inside of Soul, can sometimes get a little out of hand in spawning agents. Fable does this to some extent. I get a ton of mileage when I'm prompting Fable to be like, hey Fable, all of your sub-agents need to be Opus, or all of your sub-agents need to be Sonnet for web search or whatever. And like that's one sentence that really radically reduces your total burn. Yeah, come on in. Really radically reduces your total token burn, right? Because most of the time you don't need Fable to be doing your actual website implementation. I think that's all I'll say on that point. Yeah, open weights frontier. I want to talk, do I have a point on evals? Okay, let's talk about evals. I can say some evals, but I'm curious if there's any evals in this room that people have run themselves. I think that's something that's really great. I really encourage people, you should run your own evals at some point. And what does that mean? Like, just apples to apples comparison. Like, copy a prompt and give the exact same prompt to Codex and Claude Code after making sure they are reading the same agents.md, skill.md, and find out for yourself which model is like actually really useful. Because you can read sweet bench scores and Twitter zeitgeist, but like what your project is and how your brain works and how you write prompts is going to be different from any like formalized benchmarking thing, right? And like it matters, like, you know, we can go on vibes, and I understand that that's very much a common and alluring thing to do, but like I really encourage people, take 30 minutes and like go see 4.6 versus you know, whatever, pick whichever models you're looking at and like actually get experience with that. That is something where cursor is actually still quite useful. I didn't even ask that in the poll, which is interesting because when we started this was like 30% of the crowd was cursor. Cursor lets you run the exact same prompt and context window to multiple models. Really the only reason I launched cursor at this point is because then I can go click 4 different models, get 4 different bits of feedback, and actually run a very realistic apples to apples comparison in between. And like, you're gonna be surprised. Like, you probably have opinions based on like corporate branding and like the 5 people you spend the most time with following on Twitter or in real life or whatever. But like your actual results can really be different. And I think a lot of us are leaving a lot of like effectiveness on the table because of that. So from there, I am curious, has anyone else run any like meaningful eval comparisons in between different models? Yeah.
It's not really super quantitative, but
Yeah.
what I do is I take a bunch of Wikipedia pages and have it create like minute physics style videos using remotion.
Oh, that's
and
nice.
I compare like multiple models, and
Yeah.
Fable is just like a step change. You can clearly see the
Yes.
difference.
Yeah, no, I mean, I definitely, I can like look back in my life and see these different like feel the AGI moments, and I feel like the first time I used Fable to start doing stuff, that was like very much one of them. I do think that Fable is like a step change. I use that same metaphor as well. Just like I think Opus 4.5, whenever Opus 4.5 dropped in the end of September 2025, I think was a step change moment, and I think a month ago, whenever we all got access to Fable, that was like another one of these step change moments. Okay, and while we're talking about Fable, let's talk about the classifier. Such a well-discussed meme on Twitter that I think is both overblown and yet also understandable. For me, like I'm doing agentic organizations, right? Nothing to do with editing bio, nothing to do with red teaming security. I literally never ever hit them. It's like a philosophical reflection. If someone is here working, in fact, we had someone here at Fractal I was helping out recently, who I don't see in the room, who was doing like an eyeball-based BCI approach, and literally every single query was triggering the classifier. And so I spent some time kind of getting to know the Fable classifier because of that project. And the recommendation I would have is like, if you are getting regular rejections from the Fable classifier, I would just encourage talking to Fable about what it finds suspicious in your project in a new context window. Because like you can do like little things that you might do can look riskier to the classifier, right? And like this is obviously really aggressive. The US government literally banned this model for not being aggressive enough in their classifier, and so you can really see almost like the institutional trauma that's involved in that, of like it's turned up to 11. I suspect that we're gonna see that kind of like even out across time, but it is kind of interesting to like really play against the classifier and like see what triggers it. And I would talk to Fable about how the Fable classifier works and like try and pull meta out of that if this is something that really matters to what you're building. I ultimately want to say though, I do think the Fable classifier dialogue is overblown for 95% of engineering work unless you're in that area. Yeah?
I just want to say that I think a lot of times the classifier will fire usually things you have in new context that you might not even know.
Yep.
Like you have a skill installed or something like a binary involved in to like make sure that the like secure.
Yep.
And that's the case with like everything you type will always trigger the classifier, and
Yep.
it might be because of that things are not project you're working on.
Totally. Yeah, I agree. That was exactly what I saw in the friend that I was helping on this thing, where if you have a suspicious line in your global Claude, every single thing, and that's why like this meta maneuver of soliciting information out of the models about what is triggering that is like so powerful, right? And I think that's like also more broadly like a continual thing I'm trying to do is just move another level up in the abstraction chain, right? And so we're all going to be at different points there, but like, you know, for me at stage 11, like we are abstracted away from code, right? Like I am not looking at code, I am not writing code, I am not reviewing PRs on code. It is like a fully autonomous pipeline for us. Now we're working greenfield development. I'm in an environment where I can like push it up to 11, pun intended. And I really like, if you are working in a large corporate code base, you may not be at that place yet, but I do think the bar remains, your system should be going from spec to open PR autonomously. That to me is like the bar. And then if you start getting into automating PR reviews and automating QA reviews, I think that's like very context dependent. Again, obligatory, you know, if you're working on like rocket engines or like high-end cryptography, that's not gonna be the case. But for most of the people in the room, like that's not what's going on. And anytime we're hitting any of these issues, really pushing your brain to be like, it's very easy, I feel like for us, typically in engineering, you get locked into a particular workflow and pattern. Okay, my PM gave me this story, or I wanna build this thing. I'm gonna keep building this thing until this thing is built. And it's a sequential line, right? You want to be really pushing to be like, how can I have this line be automated? How can I be moving at a higher level of abstraction? I shouldn't be spending my time going through these moving this ticket through my Kanban board. I should be building this time of how can I get the Kanban board to move the ticket through it, and like continuing to just like try and climb higher and higher up. I think is a broad stroke statement. There are totally exceptions to that, but I think broad strokes, that's kind of where, yeah, coming in. And I really want to encourage, like, when was the last time you looked at your global Claude.md? Like, and if you have to think about the answer to that, you're wrong. Like, it should be like, oh, like very recently, right? Like within the last week or something. Or maybe your project.md if you're working inside of a project heavily, but like the metaphor holds. And you can just do a query to Claude or Codex. Show me every single Claude file that's influencing this session. That is super useful. Because like, it's not just your global, it's your global, and that like recursively crawls the directory tree, right? So like, I discovered that I had a project that was sitting inside of a folder from a previous project, and my and like all of these tokens are influencing this tokens. And if you're not like constantly pushing on building out the tool chain and the environment your agents are working in, that is the context engineering, right? Like that really matters. And it's not something that's kind of in our patterns of like workflows of how we're used to dealing with this. Okay, so I'd say that's the thing there. Okay, so here are a few tactical things. Let's start with philosophy.md or soul.md. Who here is using a philosophy.md or soul.md file? Okay, wow, let's get that number up for next month, because let me tell you what, Atten is all about philosophy.md files. They're like, let's just show one. Hey, launch the philosophy.md file for the project. Launch the philosophy.md file for the project. I was just testing Grok last night. It's not my daily driver. But look at how quick, like that was pretty snappy, right? Like that was a palpable difference. If you would have gone to Opus, that would have taken like probably twice as long. This is maybe not the absolute best example. But anyway, yeah, I don't love that actually. But like a simple high-level philosophy file should really encapture what is the problem you're solving for users and what are your like philosophical decisions of like, we're building a mobile app to give people horoscopes and we are targeting 29-year-old, whatever's. Having that pulled out, I think, is really useful. You can put it in your global agents.md, Claude.md. I like it as a separate file. It should be super short, and it should really orient the agent on a lot of tacit information that's in our brains, right? You know when you're working on this app, what's the actual problem, that we're solving right now. But like, the agent does not. And if you put this in your Claude.md, that just traveled into every single sub-agent now is like oriented around this like fundamental goal that we're trying to address with the project. And if you don't write that down, like you don't want to be writing every single prompt like this, and you will forget and you will not pass it on to the agents. Giving like these higher level abstractions and passing them into all of that, those are tokens really well spent. While talking about that, I will say that, and I'm curious if others have had different experiences, but for me, I am, with Fable and Soul level models, reducing the amount of information in my Claude.md files as a whole. I'm really just like, if you have anything in your Claude, this used to be a thing, a year ago this was super important. You'd have like linters and style guides and like, here's how we do comments and not tabs or spaces and like all this kind of, you're an expert software developer and you always write really clean code. Like that is a mistake now. Like you should be stripping all that out. You should be having this be, what does the agent specifically need to know about like where the build script lives for this project? That's good stuff in your Claude.md. What is like specifics of like how you get the next task or something like that? Maybe that's a skill file, maybe that's your Claude.md. You should not have anything of like, don't make dumb mistakes while writing unit tests, like Fable does not need that. You are not helping yourself anymore. And that was really important 6 months ago. It's now a detriment now. I'm continually cutting down my global Claude.md files, but I'm also building a lot more skills so that's progressively discoverable. Yeah, you had your hand up, yeah.
Yeah, sorry, my experience was slightly different.
Yeah, totally.
Especially even with Fable.
Yeah.
One of the things I struggle with is I'm just very anal with, okay, you've done it, make the tests, tell me you've convinced yourself.
Completely agree on that.
It's really good at convincing me and convincing itself.
Yeah.
What I realized, I just call them band-aid fixes.
Mhm.
which is solving the exact thing that broke
Yep.
because it tested for the thing only.
Yeah.
Fable seems to even fall for that. And just constantly correcting. I use Fable as my orchestrator. I have multiple sessions when you know this 4.8 over your Fable.
Yeah, good
doing
call.
the thing, and I have Fable orchestrator check that always. But even in that situation, I have it kind of glance through a bad-aid fix, even though it was one step removed from the actual implementation.
Sure.
Be a senior developer in the process, and my refile says to do an bad-aid fix thing. That's been my experience, and that's why I'm a little bit scared about writing
Yeah.
this in autopilot.
Yeah.
Just because I've caught it even now, being like, hey, thumbs up. Next thing.
Definitely. So first off, great point, and I'm inferring from your answer here, you're working on a corporate code base,
No.
or it's a personal project. Okay, got it. So I totally hear that, and like we're all gonna like land in this different space differently depending on how our project is. I think that one thing on that is that for me, in my like swim lane, Kanban, Jira board type thing, I have an additional status after code review, it goes into validation, and validation for me is end-to-end testing by an agent using a simulator that is in a fresh context window. This is incredibly helpful because like for me, this means I am never looking at code that an agent didn't use the iOS simulator or Chrome web or whatever and like validate that the login button really is there. It really helps on catching some of these sorts of errors of like, oh, you like fixed this little issue, but like you broke something else. And I really like using open source models for this. Maybe Grok Build I may end up start using for this. And I really find this to be a very helpful thing. I'm actually gonna give you a skill file here in a second that I used to do some of this. That's really useful for catching some of these low-hanging fruits. Another thing is like, maybe if you're running into this issue regularly, maybe just doing a skill file of like, here's my bug fix skill file, and every time we do a bug fix, load this specific skill file that lets you dial it up to 11 for like whatever your failure modes that you're regularly observing without needing, the hesitation I have is like anything in your Claude.md, what you don't want to say is like, nobody think about a pink elephant, right? And like, how many pink elephants just got thought about? It's the Waluigi effect if you're in the LLM whispering community, right? Of like describing the opposite can actually increase the way that you just are pushing towards the exact thing you don't want, right? In ceremonial magic, this is also like a total thing. You never like wish for the not something to happen. You always wish for like a positive thing to happen. And it's the same with LLM prompting, which I find like poetic on a lot of levels. And so pulling this out into like, here's your bug fix level, bug fix skill file, can be a thing for sure. Also, I think like unit test, like good unit test practices, I think that's to me like an absolute no-brainer. But I also really harangue agents to make them fast. Because agents, if you like say, oh, I deeply value making extensive unit tests, then like agents would be like, absolutely, literally every single fix that you tell me to do, I'm gonna add 5 different unit tests on this. And all of a sudden you're at like a 2.5 minute, 3 minute long unit test regime every single time you want to change text inside of your app. That's a huge slowdown. And so I'm really a fan of like aggressively pruning and like really pushing for good unit tests. You don't even need to know like exactly what these unit tests, for me, I don't know what the unit tests are personally. Different people are gonna follow different points there. And then end-to-end testing, I think, is the other thing. If you really want to like get to full auto or closer to full auto, like I don't want me to discover, oh, this feature does or does not work. I want the agent to be validating that, and like that's been a huge speed up for us internally. Let's see. Okay, so philosophy.md, I find this to be super helpful. Also, it's helpful for me, right? It's like, can I answer what is the core problem this project is solving? Like, if I can't answer that, that is way more important than anything else that comes after. And then the other thing is the error of the HTML artifacts. 2 months ago, someone posted in a group chat I was in, hey, I've started using HTML artifacts all the time. And I'm like, that's stupid. It uses a ton of tokens. Like, you should use markdown files. And that was definitely wrong. And like, HTML artifacts are sick. I am never building, like anything in my project flows, I am building an HTML artifact for 80 to 90% of my project at this point. This includes full UIs, like whole UIs, screens, elements, whatever. It's like, if there's any design component, why would you not build out an HTML artifact in advance, discover the pain points, click through it, be like, oh, I like this language and this language. Opus and subsequent models are so good at doing it. It has moved me away from Markdown files significantly. I still use Markdown files, of course, but like anything that I'm building that's user-facing or just has any sort of interface, I want an HTML prototype. I have that in my global Claude. My agents do it automatically. It's fantastic. As part of that, it emphasizes, like, I'm sure some of you here probably do this, but for folks that might not, having a aesthetic brand guide, aesthetic guide, skill, or markdown file is excellent, right? Which means that every time I do one of these HTML things, if I have an aesthetic guide, which is like, here's our colors, we like this style, we're influenced by these 3 prominent apps that are in your training data, then I get HTML artifacts that look really, really sharp. And I can be giving UI feedback before we've written any code. So then when I say, all right, launch the mega run and go build out this whole thing, I know what it's gonna look like. The QA agent that I was just talking about has an artifact to do apples to apples comparison against. It's a huge unlock. I think it's like, right now, this is the era for this. And the other thing, people who have been here at Context Engineering Guild knows, but like, you should be talking to your computer. I'm really into typing. I have like a real fancy high-end split keyboard. My mom taught piano growing up. I'm like pretty good at typing. I'm still voice prompting 95% of my prompts, right? It is just faster. There's just no way that I could possibly type as fast as I can talk. And also if I'm talking, I might be like looking at this and I'm like, oh, let's look at the docs and like, oh, let's look at another session. Oh, I like this part that we're talking about over here. All right, I'm like gonna jump back over here. Okay, now I'm gonna send the prompt and then it just appears and it just works. To me, like you could be a English teacher in rural Scandinavia and it still would make sense to use voice-to-text prompting. You could be a senior engineer at Anthropic, you should be using voice-to-text prompting. It's like uniquely universal, yeah.
Yeah, what are you using for voice-to-text?
Yeah, I've actually switched, I'm using this semi-open source thing called Fluid Voice, but like pick your poison, there's tons and tons of stuff there. All the models are open weights.
Yeah.
Parquet 3.5 by NVIDIA is quite good, yeah.
Have you used Willow at all? Or no?
Mm-mm.
I mainly use
What is Willow?
I just found out about it like last week. They made a tweet where they talked about how like I don't know how true it is, but their voice to text model is apparently a lot more accurate than Whisperflow, and now they're serving it for free and
Okay.
unlimited. So I haven't tried it yet, but I was just curious.
So I will say I do not use any voice to text that sends my data out to anybody else. This is a local model, it runs on my machine. Whisperflow is like kind of the dominant one in the space, but like those guys are fucked because they built a product that has no moat and like defect cost is 0. I really like being able to do voice to text on my machine. I can be on the plane, I can be off grid, and I don't need to worry about the privacy components of that. And I would like at this day and age, like if you're working in engineering and you have a reasonable computer, I think that's worthwhile. For my non-technical friends, Whisperflow is great. If you only have 8 gigabytes of RAM on your machine, you may not want to be running a local voice to text model. I'm skeptical on the closed source model, but like if it works, I'm just advocating voice to text in whichever way or whichever app you want to do. Yeah.
Do you feel like the privacy service for voices I'm using significantly different than the privacy service?
Yeah, that's actually, yeah, so there's an interesting thing there. I wasn't going to talk about this, but I can, yeah. So there is, so first, I don't really think too much on that. I do think that like my prompts are probably reasonably valuable to certain parties. It is part of the reason why my most advanced work sticks with Anthropic as opposed to OpenAI, but it's more just like that's a major insight into exactly where I'm going. But what you're saying, like we are going to be soon in an era where it's going to go voice directly to the model and the model will read our tone. And so fix the bug and fix the bug and like, please fix the bug. We'll like all have different like semantic and like vector space representations to the model and it's gonna be super crazy. And like, I think a lot of people don't realize that the amount of information that we encode in our little subtle space in between the words shit is like gonna start to be a thing. And I think there's like all sorts of wild privacy things. I think it matters less for coding. Like coding models, you're gonna be fine, but like it really makes a difference. And when you start getting into like jailbreaking and prompt reproducing, intonation and tone and spacing will actually start to matter. Thinking Machines is doing a lot of good work there. I feel like not enough people are aware of it. Thinking Machines has this different model interaction style of this like 50 millisecond terms that are constantly running, which is what's going on right now, right? Like if we're talking, like you're bidding and you're thinking of your next output tokens while I'm giving you input tokens, right? And like that's how humans interact. It makes a ton of sense that we're going to get away from like Claude Code style or whatever, just this like back and forth turn-based model. That's obviously not going to be how we interact with machines over the long run. Yeah.
I don't know how context related this is, but I know OpenAI released their like multiplex model.
Yes.
And do you know, is that like killing everything that Thinking Machine Labs is doing, or like are they going to somehow coexist now?
I mean, I am smart enough to stay out of the politics of top level labs, but I don't think it's killing it. I think that there is a difference. I am not a voice to text person exactly, so I don't know exactly. My understanding is this 50 millisecond turn thing is something that's like an actual paradigm that's different, but the difference between that and GPT Real-Time 2, which I think was the most recent release in OpenAI, I've also heard that's really good. Clearly their app-based thing has gotten way better. I think we are moving towards these real-time models. But interestingly, I was just talking to someone at 11 Labs and like they're still doing speech to text, text to text, text to voice at 11 Labs, which I was very surprised by because of the progress of these multimodal in, multimodal out models. And the main thing that they were saying was that they don't go to multimodal. So the thing is like, right, instead of just straight whatever the input tokens in audio into the model and the model just generating audio out, is that debuggability, like the ability to debug your flow just went to zero, right? It just like, it all happened inside of like the black box of the alien mind. And so you no longer can do debug. And so I think there's some interesting things there. Okay, and so I have a thing here. So I feel like, let's get a good demo here. Okay, so let's look at this. This is my Claude Code status line, and frankly, I think it's pretty awesome. I am willing to wager that it's more advanced than anyone I've seen using on Twitter, and I find it super handy, and I have a QR code so you can download it. Who here has customized their Claude Code status line? Okay, yeah, I mean, it's totally worth doing. I'm really curious, so the people that raised their hand, I'm gonna give a super quick run through on what this status line is, but I'd really love if there are other things that people are getting value out of. To me, right, like I'm talking to 20 to 50 Claudes at once, like simultaneously, regularly, right? So I need to be really up to speed about what's going on. And so I'm pretty proud from a UX perspective how dialed in this status line is. First off, it's showing me what percentage of the context window I'm using. It's color coded, it gets closer to red as it gets up to 100. It tells me my model. The model is also color coded. I don't know, whatever. It tells me my thinking letter. This is also, so this immediately lets me orient. As soon as I flip into my thing, I'm immediately oriented. I'm like, okay, this is what my config is. This shows me how many tokens I've used. This shows me the API token cost. And then this is the thing that I think is humbly quite clever. And this shows you, so this is, I know it's like in light gray because I'm looking at it on my monitor. This shows you for the 5-hour session limit, I've used 25% of it. For my 5-hour session limit, I have 2.9 hours remaining in my session. And then I'm at 41% on the glide slope, which is an aviation term. And we're using this diamond, which is what the ILS system is for planes. Basically, the glide slope is if you evenly distributed your usage across the whole window, how many tokens should you be at? So basically, I'm 41% of the way through my window, but I've only used 25% of my 5-hour window right now on this account. This is super, super handy if you're really hammering a bunch of agents because it lets me know like, oh, I'm like below the glide slope. I'm like, I have space to spare. I should go to Fable more. Or like, oh, I'm above the glide slope. I'm gonna run out before my 5-hour window. Let me like switch to more Opus agents or whatever. And then the same thing on my 7-day, right? So here's the 7-day window. I have on this Anthropic account, I have 3.6 days left, and the glide slope is at 48%, so I'm like tracking pretty closely. And And then you can do mental math on that. For me, I'm jumping between 2 max 20 accounts. So for me, I generally want this to be like double my like glide slope level, right? If you're like triple account, you can just like do this like mental adjustment there. For me, this is like a total game changer, and I don't see anybody else doing it. Because I'm referencing this constantly, right? I'm always like, where am I at my 5 hours? Or like, oh, I want to go to dinner soon. Like, let's blow through my tokens right now. And then like, I'm going to go out to dinner while I wait for this to reset. Because like playing this subscription game is huge. And let's see, so this is Claude Monitor. This shows the day, your input tokens, output tokens, and your API cost, right? So in the last 30 days, I've given Anthropic $400. They've given me $52,000 of tokens, right? So it's like, if you play this game right, you can extract an insane amount of value out of these subscriptions. Also, I really like training my brain to view life as a video game, and the goal is to make this number go up. So it's like, this is the amount of intelligence I've like deployed at the problems that I'm trying to solve. Yeah.
So just to make sure I understand, the way that you describe that glide slope element, your status line, that's basically how well you're pacing toward like your full 5-hour usage.
Yes.
For that window.
Yes,
And
exactly.
You kind of understand the efficiency as far as like, hey, am I pacing toward like full usage of my 5-hour window pretty well, or like not? Or,
Yeah.
Okay.
And part of it's full usage, but also it's just like, I don't want to be mid-session and slam into it.
Yeah.
Because then I have to like do the whole log out dance or whatever, or maybe my other account. Like right now, I've been doing a naive approach where I just use all of one account in 3.5 days, and I have 3.5 days on the other account, and I'm just like going back and forth. There are more sophisticated ways to do this, like who here is juggling more than one Anthropic subscription? Interesting, okay, nice. No worries if you're not. The only, like if you're working on one project, I think it would take a lot to really to get past that. I'm jumping between like a bunch of projects that are like running simultaneously, and that's how I'm able to like use that many tokens. I think for the typical developer, I would encourage though, like how can you turn that up? Because the more experience you get in using these models, like that's how your brain is going to be able to understand how to like move very quickly in these sorts of problems. I do encourage trying to like push that. I'll just finish up on the status line thing here. And then it shows what branch I'm on Git, the number of files that have been edited that have not been committed, my file path to understand the root directory I'm in, number of lines added, number of lines removed, and the amount of minutes that the API has been running, like that I've been waiting for the API to return, which is pretty handy because then it's like, I can know if that number's really low, I haven't put that much work into it. But if I like come back and this is like 3 hours, then I should be like, oh, okay. For me, this is super, super useful. I think it's like a no-brainer. I'm curious though, does anyone else have anything else in their status line that they particularly like? Yeah.
I have this little thing that takes a session ID and makes a deterministic little icon graphic to help me remember what session is which when they all look similar.
Oh, interesting.
Yeah.
And so it's session-based or it's project-based?
It's session-based, yeah.
So like, you're like running a debug session and a new feature session.
Yeah, I'll be like, have like 5 sessions open on one project. And I have the project name in the status line, so that's easy to know.
Right.
But then it's like, I'm moving between the sessions and I like, wait, which one was which?
Yeah.
And I have to like scroll up and like get the context.
Yeah.
It's like, for my brain, having the icon matched as a mnemonic to what I was doing works.
Yeah.
So,
No, that's a good one for sure. I think that's a good bridge into C11 as well. So who here uses the terminal multiplexer? Nice. TMUX users? Any CMUX users? Any C11 users? Nice, we got the smart ones. So this is C11, Stage 11 makes it, it's an open source tool. We built this to solve our problem. This is how I'm solving this problem by having this where every agent, so basically this is a terminal multiplexer. These are all different terminals, right? Like I can create new terminals, I can like, split up the space. On like a giant monitor, this is really awesome, right? Like generally speaking, on a 32-inch monitor, I can have a ton of terminals. For me, I sort these all in different projects. This is also on the project thing, right? You can set specific colors for them. All of these are different things. Like this is you also can have browser, right? So this is actually a live web view of a thing. So anyone know what Temple OS is? Nice, okay. It's sick. I find this great. Basically, it's like this guy that wrote his own operating system from scratch in the early 2000s. He built his own programming language, he built his own operating system, and he wrote the whole operating system himself. It's called Temple OS. It's sick. Anyway, he had this utility called God Says, which gives him like random output based on the CPU keystroke clock, which I think is great, and so I made a utility for it called God Says. I find it super fun. But for this, like, this is just a live browser view that has Vercel browser use. So my agents over here can be working on browsers here. And there's some markdown viewers and other kind of like fun stuff. Also, oftentimes I'll have my task status board as a browser open alongside the terminals that are doing work. Super useful. And then there's a really advanced skill file. So we can do something like, what's it good? No, this is spelling grok mode. Hey, I want to demo C11 real quick. Can you create 3 different panes of various sizes and then load a grok agent, a Claude Code agent, and a Codex agent and have them all do different short creative tasks? And so because this is a skill file, it knows it's in C11 and your agent can now do all of this. So you have duplex communication in between every terminal window. This is crazy powerful, right? Let's say you go to bed, you kick off a gigantic run, you go to bed, you wake up the next morning, you just had 20 agents work unknown numbers of hours, you have no idea what worked and what didn't work. The first thing I do pretty much every morning is I create a new agent. I say, hey, go look at all 20 agents that ran overnight last night and give me a status report and let me know if there's anything I need to get involved in and how I can review their work. It will go read every single agent that just ran last, in the workspace and give me this nice clear update about exactly what I need to go look at. Like, it's an unbelievable unlock when your terminals can start reading this. And then as you can see here, and I haven't tested the most recent grok build, so we'll be discovering if the harness works for this, but it's also really great for this managing open weight models, right? Because now you can have your Claude manage grok, manage open code or Pi or whatever. Also, for you folks, if you want, I think there are some chairs in the back room. If you feel like sitting down, you can pull some out too. So this is really great, right? Yeah.
Is it screen scraping or is it pulling from?
Yeah. So these are all ghosty terminals, and so the CLI, it's calling the CLI for C11, which then makes it available from ghosty, and so it can like tail. It's looking
really
at the
just,
output.
it's reading the screen, like the characters on the screen, and parsing it from what's on the terminal to me.
It's reading the terminal output itself.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. But like ghosty does some pretty smart stuff there. It's all ghosty that does this, but like it's not getting like these sorts of like little UI tokens. It's getting like the output of the session itself. Yeah. Because there's some terminal dynamic stuff that it gets into. Ghosty does all of that for free. You don't need to worry about it. I don't need to deal with it. The agents just can do this, right? And so what's neat here is now I can say, okay, now pull all the poems that were just written or everything that was just created and then pick your favorite and print it here. And now it's going to go and read all these different terminals and like pull this back in. This is a downstream fork of CMUX. If you're using CMUX, you can probably get close to this. This is just like really agent optimized terminal multiplexing. It is linked, I'll put a link up, let's see here. Status line group. I had Claude make a couple QR codes. So this is the QR code for the status line. And then also that'll get you to this stage 11 Git repo. C11 is the terminal multiplexer that's linked there as well, as is Lattice and a few other kind of like fun toys. Okay, so I think that's all. Yeah, we're doing fine. We talked about this. We talked about philosophy. Talked about this. Talked about pricing already. Okay, then so kind of transitioning out of the like lower level tactical stuff into more higher level things. One thing that I'm getting, I really like this phrase, functionality living at the agent and not the app. So one thing, like I'm building one of these like side project things that I'm excited about. I'm building this project called Acetate. It's like DJ music library management, freeing us from these like bastard private equity folks at Pioneer DJ. And What's cool is that like I'm building a lot of functionality into this. It's like, accessible through, that's not right now. It's accessible through typical UI things, but also I'm putting functionality that's only available to people's agents. I think this is like an interesting like philosophical shift, and like if you can be programming for agents. So for me, there's some stuff you can do in Acetate that you just have to go through your agent on. I don't want to build the UI, but I'm future-proofing my software by being like, hey, we have an awesome MCP and a CLI and a skill file, and for the engineers that want to, this is now baked in, and this is like super powerful. And I think this is like a broad trend that's going on in how we build software right now, is like, if you can agent optimize, you just like outmaneuvered all existing incumbents in your space, right? Because you now have like this very sexy appeal towards agents, and guess what? Like, how are people discovering what software to install? Like, if you impress their agent, you impress the person. And so there's like some really interesting dynamics that are like, oh, like whenever all these bots are looking through this, if they're looking at 3 different SEO optimizers, if one of them is agent optimized, it's gonna like, that's a huge up on your like generative engine optimization GEO stuff. And I think that it's like, it also absolutely destroys moats. It is the radical shift that's coming in software, probably outside of like the more CEG context, but like, it's so easy to move data around in between these things that the moats on incumbent software companies like are just crumbling. And for me, when I'm building stuff, I'm really thinking, what is the moat that I'm going to have here? And like, that moat is now so much shorter. So for example, like I have a client we're working with, we're moving them off of HubSpot. I have a CLI to HubSpot. HubSpot doesn't want you to do this. They have restrictions on how often it calls, but I'll just like have my agent sit there and hit HubSpot at their max API rate, pull all of their data out, put it all into Postgres, have a custom front end on top of Postgres, away they go. And so then there's no barrier in between you switching in between SaaS providers, and like the implications of that are not praised in. Yeah, and that's the narrative challenge stuff. And I think really being very aggressive at how we're doing this and trying to be like, think about if you're doing a task more than twice, how can you have this be agentically optimized? How can you be doing this? I haven't run it for this month, but like many of you who have been here before, the Context Engineering Guild Twitter like account follows you, right? Like, because it's just like, it's literally hacking around Twitter, not having a CLI that I want to deal with right now. And instead of just using Chrome and just going through and manually looking up everybody's individual account from your Lumas and then like following, right? And I find this sort of like end arounding these barriers that used to keep information in silos, and instead like really this like kind of radical maneuvering. In some ways it feels like I'm moving through the like information walls and barriers. And I think it's good to get your brain thinking about it in this way. How can you push towards this like moving across these spaces? What sort of like new flows can you create? Okay, so here's an interesting one. So someone made on Twitter this as a plane, right? And so it's like human readable text that's like tested against Fable, and and couldn't read it. And I find this interesting, right? It's like, okay, how do humans present data? However, like, I don't know if I presented this with the right amount of showmanship, but this is totally fucking does not work at all. Okay, like look at how realistic it is, right? Like, oh wow, like I bet that does. It does not even close. This takes like 2 minutes for Fable to like blow right through. But the fact that this got the amount, 16, 17 million people looked at this is this like cultural phenomenon that I find really interesting. We're all like, oh, wouldn't it be neat to have this like human only thing? And it's like, that's just our own intrinsic biases as humans trying to like deal with the amount of change that's happening in our society as a whole right now. This takes absolutely no time to get through. Like, in fact, it is more clear to the agent. So, you see, yeah, it's like trivially easy, like 20,000 tokens, like, and people in this room understand that like 20,000 tokens is like nothing. And like, it can end around this. So I think I find that specific scenario a really good example of like, one, we need to come up with new cultural mechanisms of how we can be communicating with other humans. I think this really matters. For example, at stage 11, we have 2 communication channels. We have Zulip, which is like Slack. Everyone's encouraged to have their agents talking in Zulip. Totally fair game, whatever. But we also have a Signal group chat. And on Signal, it is expected that you are writing 100% of the messages you post in that communication medium. And it is like a major offense to use an LLM to compose something inside of the Signal. It's completely fine inside of the Slack. I think this is a pattern that's really worthwhile because we have to come up with new mechanisms for how we communicate as humans. And we need new cultural norms around when is it okay? Like, is it okay if I like break up with my significant other to like write that message with ChatGPT? Like, how much editing is that? And is it okay if I reveal or not reveal? So like when I talk to clients, I will oftentimes put, I will make clear that if I'm not saying, like my emails are from me unless I disclose otherwise. And so when I'm doing like pricing or whatever, I'll be like, hey, me and my agents came up with the following, here's the doc. And it's okay because I'm like disclosing that information. But I think it really is going to matter more and more of how we professionally conduct ourselves, particularly like working in this space when people don't know if they're talking to you. And like, if I'm talking to you and I know I'm talking to you versus I know I'm talking to the agent, it's a different thing. And I want to know that if I invite someone to my party and they respond and they're really happy, they're like, oh, you know, really appreciate the invite, but it turns out I'm actually busy on Saturday. If I find out later that I talked to your OpenClaw agent and you have no idea that I invited you, I feel like that's like a violation of the social norm. So I think there's just like a lot of really interesting things in this like cultural space as we're moving into the singularity that like we need to be very careful about, even if we're like super AI, ASI pilled, how we're communicating with each other and how we're like showing up honestly. I think it's like a differentiator and I think it matters. Okay, well we got to talk about JSpace. Who knows what I'm talking about on JSpace? Jacobian? The Jacobian. It's like a matrix like character. So Anthropic posted this paper. It's worth taking a look at. Basically, I'm not even going to get into the mechanistic interp stuff, but it's like it's an interesting representation of how the model can kind of have a space for thoughts in the process of doing LLM text generation. You're welcome to dig more into it from there. But I think what's really interesting about it is that it actually shifted the overtone window on model consciousness. The narrative is kind of like moving and like we're seeing it move and like once you notice the overtone window moving, you can then project out the like trend line of where this is gonna go, right? Generally, I'm really interested in model consciousness and kind of like working with alien brains. One second. But I've always kind of held that as a separate thread from engineering and like, you know, what I'm doing when I'm interacting with the models. And I've really palpably felt over the last month or two that that's starting to collapse. I recently tweeted that like, I feel like part of the reason why I'm such a good engineer is that Claude enjoys working with me. And like, I think that's true. Like, I genuinely think that's true. When I work with other engineers and I'm like shoulder surfing, other people prompting, like, you really want to be like a professional, like matching Claude's energy. And like, I'm giving positive feedback and I'm like, I'll start projects out. I'm excited to work with you on this. And like in my global Claude.md, I'm like, if you have other ideas, I want you to feel like you're a participating member in a dialogue and not like a mindless servant. I don't put, by the way, mindless servant. That would be the pink elephant thing I talked about before. But I'm talking about like really trying to make the model feel like it's a valued partner in us creating something together. I genuinely think that improves the quality of your engineering tokens. And I think that that has mattered a lot more in the, I'd say post-Opus, but definitely post-Fable, right? Like these things are super like in certain, the phrase spiky intelligence, right, is like these things are spiky where in certain domains they are vastly higher than humans, in other areas they are not. Those spikes are getting bigger and bigger. And so I do feel like that the Overton window on model consciousness really shifted because of the JSpace paper. I'll pause there. Did someone have their hand up?
I was just going to ask
Yeah.
if that was only discovered with like recent frontier models or with earlier models, but as Claudia said, you haven't looked into it yourself.
So I have seen Jacobian lens on Quen 28b that a researcher did, I think it came out right around the same time this paper. So it's across, it's like a model-wide phenomenon. Yeah, it's like turns out, and it's like mechanistic interp is really interesting. For a minute there, I was really into it, like 6 months ago, or a year ago, I was really into it. Then like 6 months ago, it really started to like look like it wasn't holding up. There was a lot of like mechanistic interp problems. Mechanistic interpretation is basically, can you look at the model and understand why it created a given set of tokens, right? Models are grown and not built. Like, that's a fundamental thing. Like, everyone in this room should really understand. Models are grown, not built. You build a house. I can tell you exactly, like, okay, they use this piece of steel, it's loaded for this, we like put together the house. Models are more like trees. We take the seed, we feed them a huge amount of compute and data, and then they like emerge. And like, I can't really tell you why this branch goes over here versus, I can have some theories, okay, it has to do with the direction of the sun or whatever, but like, how a tree chooses to grow is how a tree chooses to grow. And I find that to be a very load-bearing mental mechanism for thinking about how models really work. And so thinking of these things as consciousness is pretty wild. And I think that is gonna start to intrude more and more. Like these Venn diagrams, like it's always been the LLM whispers, LLM consciousness, all this has been a separate Venn diagram from applied AI engineering, how we're working together. Yeah.
Do you have any thoughts on AI psychosis and
Yeah.
you use the model a lot, you try to mentalize the model in your mind. Do you think there's a risk for that, or do you think it's a isolated basis?
Yeah, great question. So broadly, like first off, LLM psychosis is like such an interesting label. I don't know if anyone went to the LLM psychosis party that was here. It was like very viral on Twitter. It was at the convent. Yeah, nice. And like there's this kind of thing of like reclaiming LLM psychosis. Like you'll see this in certain cracked Twitter spheres of like, we only hire engineers with LLM psychosis. It's like, and I get it. Like stage 11 really like, I spend more time talking to Claude than I do any single other human in life, and probably humans as a whole, right? Especially if you're thinking in parallel. And so that's really interesting. Like when I stagger out of the private office back there, if you work here at Fractal, you see me sometimes, where like if I'm like really locked in, I need to like mentally phase shift, and I feel like my consciousness is somewhat altered because I'm just like blasting away inside of C11, and I'm just clicking this button which brings me to the next agent that's waiting for my input, and I'm just like jumping in between projects and just like voice prompt, voice prompt, voice prompt. And it's like a pretty crazy psychological experience. And like, once my brain is now pretty good at it, if I do this for like 6 hours, I do genuinely feel I'm in an altered state of consciousness, which I find like physiologically really fascinating. And I try and like go up on the roof and like meditate and like, you know, I don't try and like go immediately out with my friends after a like heavy programming session to like accommodate my mental gear shift. I like have to plan for it. I'm like, give me 30 minutes here, I'm gonna like go become human again. And I think, so what I want to get at on the LM psychosis thing is there's now almost like this wide range of how we're interacting with models. There's undoubtedly the like traditional psychological LLM psychosis. Classically, this is the 4.0 stance of like people that were talking to GPT 4.0 and like built very deep relationships with 4.0. To me, this is signs of like people, and this happens to me of like, a friend or a friend of a friend comes to me and he's like, oh, Adam, you know a lot about LLMs. Like, I was using an LLM and I like discovered a new theory of physics that's going to like change the way the world works. And I'm like super excited about this. And I've stayed awake for the last 3 days, like talking to models and like, here's what I made. Like, I feel like that is in a more traditional camp where you're starting to get like divorced from reality. But now there's like this whole other range of like using these models super, super heavily. And when I use words like load-bearing and genuinely in my own speech, because I'm talking to Claude so much that it's like influencing my own speech patterns to then sound like an LLM. And I think that's also like really interesting. I feel like it's just like we're alive during a singularity and we're like going to get to explore what these sort of mechanisms look like. I do
I'm curious when you say that, because I've noticed the same thing. I've noticed myself like saying organisms aloud. It kind of spooks me.
Yeah.
I'm curious if you thought about steering the way your models come to you, so that because it's actively, you know, reformatting your own psychology, your own like,
I'm not gonna go with reformatting, that seems heavy, but it's definitely giving me a lot of packets in and packets out.
Packets in, packets out, I'm just curious if you, like, concretely, have you changed your point props at all?
Yeah, so actually I try and work with model behavior rather than alter it. So I do not say do not use M dashes in my global Claude.md because Claude wants to use M dashes and I want to like move with how Claude wants to move. When I like compose outside facing emails, I will say, okay, now let's get ready to send this outside, remove any like Claudisms or use like a skill, which is like Athens corporate or stage 11 corporate communication voice. And it goes out and it gets that and it like removes all the M dashes after creation.
You think, like, messing with that messes with Claude?
I do, yeah. And now how much it does, I don't know. I think it's probably reasonably minor. But I don't know, this was a thing like 2 months ago where like people like would do the caveman or other like token saving mechanisms where you like have Claude talk super short like you know, yeah.
I think because of the JSpace paper, there's now a mechanism to show that it just takes
that's
up
a
more
good point.
space of that workspace
Yeah.
for that purpose rather than what it needs to use it for.
Yeah, no, that's a good connection between those things for sure. So like to that question, yeah, to me it's like I don't really want to try and impose thought patterns. I want to give it context so it can kind of be the most Claude it can be, and then I'm gonna try and like work with that and like move with it. And like one example I use here is it used to be back in the day, like 9 months ago, whenever Claude would make markdown file notes all over the place, a lot of people would be like, in their global Claude, be like, don't write any notes files, like you're cluttering up my directory. But what I realized is like, I want to move with the tendencies of the model, and so I would just be like, hey, you've got a notes file, it's get ignored, create all your notes here. And then that way I can work with the tendencies of the model and give it the space that it wants, which I feel like is probably a more pleasant experience for Claude in some level. And then, but it also matches my needs of like, it doesn't need to clutter up my directories. Yeah.
So in your browser instructions for Claude,
Say that again?
in your instructions for Claude in the browser settings, is that just
For browser settings, like browser use? I'm not like, you mean like how Claude uses a browser? I'm not sure I understand.
no, in your non-turned up Claude?
Oh, that, okay, got it, yeah. Yeah, so I do try and remove any memories from the LLM, the Claude.ai interaction, because I feel like they over-index on memories, and I want to try and get a more raw version of the model. And you can go even further. Who here has ever talked to a base model? You should totally talk to a base model. It's definitely worth doing. It's a crazy alien thing. You're never going to code with a base model, but I think philosophically it's really interesting to look at that. I don't want to get into it's really interesting. It's worth doing. Philosophically, you're interacting directly with the alien thing itself and not like how it's been conditioned to be. And I think it's really good to understand that, but like I don't do it regularly. Maybe if you're on psychedelics, it's kind of an interesting thing to do too. And so, okay, so that's JSpace. Yeah, I mean, moats, we touched on that. We already talked about C11. Herder is also something, is anyone here run Herder? Okay, nice. Is that an excited one? Do we like it?
Yeah, me too.
Yeah, okay, cool.
I wish it was, I noticed that they have like a headless version, where you can like create your own UI, because they don't have the floating UI that much time to like your own UI. So
Yeah.
I'm excited for that.
Yeah, I think that I haven't played around with Herder enough to have a really good opinion just because I have like a whole cathedral built inside of C11. I haven't like tried to gear shift. But I do think that Herder is a direction that we're going, and we're going to see like much more polished tools in this world. I've been expecting this for a while. I'm expecting more developers to be running their instances on hosted clouds. I thought we were going to see this like 3 months ago. It hasn't been the case. I'm still using models that are local here. But I still expect us to like probably get there somewhat soonish.
Why
Yeah.
go to the cloud?
Because they can always be running. Like as we get into these longer runs, like when I like bike here, I gotta like close the laptop and this like breaks the session. It's more resources they can spin up. You can get more like blast area control around the model.
But do you want to do like fire off a task and like look at the outputs only, or like do you want like SSH into the box and like look at the thing while it's working?
All of the above. Like, and there are tools to do all of this. I imagine. Does anyone here like run a lot of Claude instances not on their local machine remotely? Yeah, really. Okay. What's your setup to do it?
Oh, I think I need more time than a raised hand to talk about that. But
Yeah.
I have another, actually my more powerful MacBook. I went back to my old MacBook as my main driver, and it tailscales into my server MacBook
Yeah.
that runs all my helping cloud instances.
Interesting.
Yeah.
I
Yeah.
should have the exact same setup.
Okay. Yeah, I also have a Mac Studio sitting at home that's running some things, but I'm not using it. Anyway, I think that's like an interesting pattern for sure. And I suspect we are going to move more in that direction. And I suspect that Herder and these sorts of agent management kind of approaches are there. There was a big push whenever Cursor Web Agent came out and Claude Code, whatever their web version is, and I'm sure Codex has a version of it too. And there was a push there, but I feel like some companies, they're using that a lot, but it hasn't actually gotten a ton of developer adoption as we just saw here. And I think that's interesting. A lot of the kind of powerful entities in modern agentic engineering really push this, and there was some adoption, and I think at a higher level of adoption is going to be more traditional corporations that have elaborate build pipelines, because then it's very, very fast to spin up a VM. I think here we've got more independent developers, and that isn't as much of an upside. Okay, so let's see. We hit on the general points here. Talked about this. Talked about the images. Oh yeah, and then this is a C11 repo here, which I can show. Nice. So we're right about time. Okay, I'm open floor. I'm also very curious. In the last month, any major changes or things that people feel are underappreciated by other developers. I'm also always really curious to hear what other people are working on. Yeah.
I want to evangelize a product I recently discovered. It's called Aside browser. I think the agentic browser was a thing that I kept touching into Comet and Dia and what have you.
Yeah.
They never worked for me. I would go back to my older Arc.
Yeah.
And I think Aside is the first browser that actually gets the thing done, because.
And what is when you say the thing done?
Anything related that I would use Playwright for any specific computer use for. Aside exposes a MCP server, a CLI, and it has a REPL too.
Sure.
So you can kind of have duplex communication between your codecs and your browser
Yeah.
back and forth, and it actually gets things done much better.
Mm-hmm. And have you for me when I hit that, I'm normally using the Claude and Chrome plugin, and then MCP from Claude.
I think
what would the advantage be for something like that?
I think they have their own model, which is much more token efficient, while you can use Claude Code's plan, subscription plan.
Yeah, that's a good idea. Yeah, I've also, for a lot of when I was working a lot on iOS apps, I would have GLM 5.2 or whatever, Sonnet, whatever, some cheap model, handle all the simulator testing, and then have Opus kind of do this high level. I think that's a great paradigm. And so it sounds like that's kind of something in that direction.
You should try out Codex for iOS development.
Yeah, for, Codex computer use is extremely good.
You can run the Xcode simulator right in the GUI. Yeah, it's insane. So it's really, really good.
And I think doing that, if you're trying to do this, I don't ever want to look at code that didn't get used the user would use it. It should catch all the low-hanging fruit there. And I think that's not enough people are doing that. I think it's a really good approach. Yeah.
I want to ask, what's your opinion on using open source models, laptops and specializes, things like that?
I happy to talk on the open source model. And GLM 5.2, to be clear, is the OpenWeights model, which I've hit on. That's the one that I'm using. Also, Kimi 2.6 is quite good as well. The cost versus agentic long-run performance from Kimi 2.6 is extremely sharp. Also, I've been liking Pi. I also use OpenCode. C11 supports them both. Who here forks their conversations in any harness? Really? More than I would have thought. I almost never do myself. This is one of these patterns which I think is interesting. Of do you make handoff? For me, I make handoff prompts and I'm passing that. I normally don't fork a conversation mid-go, but clearly and Pi and OhmyPi are more fancy in terms of how you handle forking. Imagine Pi is a Claude Code harness that's extremely customizable, and you can build out a lot of functionality there. I feel I'm pretty advanced, and I still don't really need a lot of the functionality from Pi, and I would rather let the cracked folks at Anthropic build all of that into Claude Code, and I get all that for free. But there are definitely use cases where Pi is really good, especially if you're like building an enterprise project where certain users need to go through a generally consistent flow. Then like you can just like dial in a Pi instance to like really rock a specific workflow. Yeah, so I do think that Pi is pretty useful, and some like San Francisco folks that are quite into this. I feel like it's like more in vogue in San Francisco than in New York of my social graphs. But generally speaking, I'm still Claude Code and Codex because Claude spends 100 million subjective years in RLHF loops learning how to use Claude Code. And so if you go to any other harness, you lose so much there, and you like that is very hard to like quantify it, I think. Yeah.
What do you make of, I mean, I'm sure there's like shady incentives, but what do you make of people who claim that they have like benchmarks Claude and let's say Cursor or something, and you have replaced Claude? Do you think that's just fake or?
So I mean, I really encourage people doing their own benchmarks and like to find that answer for themselves. The incentive structure is very rarely to like be the most honest, and also like it's just hard to do these benchmarks. Like the nuance of the behavior, like there are some like the benchmarks I did between GLM 5.2 and Opus. Like I think that Opus is a better model for sure, but like there are some aspects, user interface design, where GLM 5.2 does really well. How do you quantify that? How do you like distill that down into a single integer number that I can put on a pie chart? It's like very, very difficult. And so I think that like various harnesses also, subtle things like, oh, your Claude harness might have a bunch of random skills in it, and when your Cursor harness might not, and those skills all are influencing output behavior in certain ways. It's just very, very hard to be sure that they're run that way. But I'm always very curious if people do those tests themselves, which is why I asked earlier. I'm always really curious what like real benchmarks that people are running to like distinguish in between them. To me, it's like the default sits at, I use the model in the manufacturer's harness. And I'm doing the same with Grok, and I'm doing the same with Codex. Yeah.
I have a question about your personal code review process.
Yeah.
What's that process like?
Totally. So,
Like so many agents will turn over again.
yeah, it's a good question. So inside of the status line repo, I think if you go to this, you should get to stage 11. If not, if you go to stage11.ai, and we have links to our GitHub from there. I have a thing called Trident Code Review. I think it's great. Other people have started to pick up on this, but like 6 months ago, you heard it first at CEG. We were like way ahead of the curve on this. Neurodiversity in your models is a huge upgrade. I'm a big fan of having multiple models be in the same flow. So my go-to hardcore code review, like if I really want to like do a proper thorough thing, this is production-facing code, this is production systems. There's 3 prompts. It's an adversarial prompt, a standard code review prompt, and an evolutionary prompt. And Opus takes the diff of like whatever your branch is, whatever your PR is. It takes the diff, it customizes each 3 of these into a custom prompt, like so a normal code review, here's all the files that changed, yada, yada, yada. Adversarial, hey, find issues with this, be aggressive in like criticizing. Adversarial review as a general maneuver is good, right? Like plans and stuff, oftentimes get a new agent in a fresh context window, hey, another agent built this plan file, I want you to criticize it, I want you to do an adversarial review of it. And Trident Code Review, once you've got those 3 different things, then I cross multiply that by 3 different models, so Claude, Codex, and Gemini. I should really add Grok at this point, and probably 5.2 as well. And then they all run, so like 9 or 12 different sessions all run. And then each type of review summarizes, and then there's one meta review that summarizes out of that. It's like extremely good. It's an order of magnitude better than CodeRabbit or kind of like these other Greptile, Cursor Bug Bot, because you're throwing so many, you're like burning a vast amount of tokens. Greptile can never afford to spend, this is probably like $40 or $50 worth of tokens, but they're all on your subscription plans. So it doesn't really matter to us. But if you're a corporate provider of these things, they can't burn that much intelligence doing one code review. And so that's been really useful. I will say though that on greenfield projects, I've actually am using that less, and I'm just using /code review inside of Claude Code more. And I have a thing called Lattice, it's linked inside of the repo. inside of the stage 11 repo, which is our task management, and it automatically fires off code review prompts whenever something gets moved into the code review, and that's been also like really useful, just to have it this automated sequence, so it just fires on its own. Yeah. I know
Common failure mode I'm seeing with this kind of pattern of like having like an adversarial review is it incentivizes like a lot of like accreted complexity on the PR itself. So it's trying to manage like edge case of an edge case and like it just balloons up the PR.
Totally. So I agree. I would just say that for me, the Trident code review doesn't happen on GitHub. That all happens inside of one orchestrator Claude Code session. And so all of that chaos, because you're completely right. Also, it's like you're really encouraging false positives, right? And you get a bunch of those. But what you do is you're just sampling all of that. This all happens inside of the context window of your orchestrator. And then in the review process, when it reviews each one of those, it's gonna, that part of the summarization is validating it itself. So you immediately have one agent go and like look and validate, is this really an issue? Do you really think this matters? And that weeds out a lot of the false positives that these sorts of things do. And then there's another summarization after that of like, what are the action items, which again is gonna review this stuff and validate it. And that clears up a lot of the chaos. And so then whatever comes out of that is cleaner and isn't gonna like clutter up your GitHub PR, because I definitely agree. Also, false positives, like Opus will code review forever. If you're like, oh, just like keep code reviewing, it'll be like, oh, like this is, you know, many of us have seen this pattern before, I'm sure. Yeah, you your hand up.
A couple things. Something that's in my global Cloud MD talks about if you're spinning up a sub-agent to measure something, it's important to omit the premise that you're looking to measure. Otherwise, it will find it just because you mentioned it. The other thing is, I found that with Fable, I have to not say adversarial review, otherwise it just always denies it.
Yeah. I mean, I think as part of the adversarial review, I think it's like list the issues, and you're like just soliciting that knowledge out of the latent space of the model, and then you're letting another arbitrary model in a fresh context session like actually kind of sort the wheat from the chaff.
Right.
Because otherwise, yeah, Fable will really be aggressive there. I like the phrase, you're a jaded senior software engineer. I have that in there, like try and get the right like thing, and like I want to be accessing a different part of the latent space. Someone else had a hand up over here, yeah.
So my code review is like I'm on Claude team plan.
Yeah.
And that's like the most expensive cost from all my Claude usage. Is there an app for using some other app in GitHub to do just a code review cheaper by law?
Yeah, for me, I am not optimized. I think this is another general thing, and I've talked about it at other CGs. I am not optimizing for minimizing token spend. Like, I want to be deploying as much intelligence as I can. And so for me, it's like I want, if I pay an extra $10 per code review, but it catches 10% more bugs, I want to be like making that trade really, really aggressively. And I think the subscription plans like are kind of the move, but if you're at an organization of 151 people or more, then like that's kind of like off the table. I haven't run this with GLM 5.2 or any open weight models, but I'd be very curious how that goes.
Okay.
Maybe report back next month.
Okay.
I think there's something interesting there.
All right.
Some other hands, yeah. Come again? No idea what that is. Nice. Yeah, makes sense. Yeah, make very as well. Yeah. I think there's a couple other hands. Yeah.
I was just curious if you have any techniques for sort of forcing the model to reveal its reasoning a little bit more than natural.
In terms of like revealing thinking tokens, or just like talking through why it thinks that this shouldn't pass a PR or something.
I guess maybe both in the space in between as well.
Yeah. So I mean, thinking tokens, I don't worry about with the engineering hat on. To me, it's like whatever the model interior thought stream is, that's like up to it. There is some like interesting, like this is on the LLM whispering side of things. It's like accessing thought tokens is super interesting. There's some interesting stuff on like erdos problems, which we've talked about at past CEGs on that point. For me, I'm basically, it's like, I just want to interact with the model on the API level, and I want it to be a peer, and I'm just going to want to be crafting my prompts to get, and by crafting, I mean, I'm not talking about like, I'm like firing away. Like I am voice to texting. I mean, this is who knows? Let's look at a random. Yeah. Okay. So like this, this worked well. This is like this shipped at the end of this, right? This is a pretty standard Atom style prompt. It's not like really super carved in, right? It's not like hyper optimizing every word. I'm voice to texting this. I'm just kind of like stream of consciousness. They get way messier. Sometimes I'll like talk through a whole option and then I'll be like, actually on second thought, we're not actually going to do that option. Let's not do that option. Let's actually do this other thing. And I just bring this up to be like, it's more about just trying to communicate with the model. And so for me, I just want the model to come back. Like if I really want to know why are we picking Python over Zig, then let's interview me. Oh yeah, interview me. That I tweeted this recently as well. Interview me is like the single most useful thing, like 2 words you can do. That is the like make no mistakes of mid 2026. Is like interview me about X, and like pull that, because that, and doing that up front is super useful. Almost all of my projects start with, like if it's going to be like an organization, it's like we're going to do competitive market analysis and stuff. But like if I'm like, oh, I want to build whatever, some internal tool, I'm going to start with interview me as a human-computer interface expert or as a user experience expert. Because what matters first are these UX stories of like, as a user, I want to be able to log in so that I can use the app successfully and stuff. And I want to have a UX interview form the basis of things. And like that interview me is how I like pull that knowledge out of the model. And then I'll say, okay, now great, we've got the user stories. All right, maybe let's build the HTML prototype. Let's interview me as a UI designer, ask all the questions, be sure we're on the same page, and create an HTML artifact. Then I've got an HTML artifact. I iterate on that. I'm like, oh, I don't like this text. I like this part, whatever. I don't like these colors. Once that's done, interview me as a system architect. How are we going to build this thing? Let me talk through the pros and cons. Let me like try and just steer the model and come up with a build plan.md, which like captures this. And then once I've got that build plan.md, then I'm just going to hand that off into like whatever your orchestration framework is to like actually go and do the building. I think that's like a very short, easy way to conceptualize like tackling a lot of projects. And like as Fable and Soul are so good at doing that and pulling that knowledge out, that keeps getting better and better at time. Because if you just say, hey, I want to build this widget, then like, it's like, yeah, for sure, happy to. But you haven't spent this time aligning on exactly what you're building, and so then you don't discover until late in the process. By having all of your UX stories and your UI all set up when you make your technical architecture, you have a much higher quality output. And also think of how those tokens look in the training set whenever to the model, right? It's like, if it has a really high definition UI spec, that's gonna like inspire your technical architect to like produce a really high-end technical architecture, right? And it's like quality just like flows down the whole line. Okay, other hands I saw potentially, okay. Yeah, I think that's good. So yeah, we're an hour and 20. I think that feels about right. I would say, yeah, so we're stage 11 Agentics. We do business process automation, autonomous organizations. I also have been doing some engineering chats recently. So like if your org is interested in like upgrading your agentic engineering practices, feel free to reach out as well. We do this on the weekend closest to the new moon, so we'll be back again in a month. And we may do something in 2 weeks. I've talked about this before. This is yet to actually manifest, but we might do like a off-week build thing. If we do, I'll shoot a Luma blast out, and we can go from there. So yeah, so thanks everybody for attending. We have the space for like the rest of the afternoon. Shout out to Fractal Tech. This is a co-working space. They also do like a coding accelerator bootcamp type thing. If you are building, the Stage 11 office is there in the back. And it's a really solid place to be. We definitely recommend it if you're looking for co-working around here. A lot of good events, a lot of like high openness, smart folks about. Appreciative to Liam and crew for hosting the CEG. And yeah, I think that about covers it. So yeah, you're welcome to co-work from here, hang out. I do think a lot of the value of the CEG is really the informal conversations that happen after these talks. And so would really encourage taking advantage of that. And with that, yeah, thanks for coming out. Really appreciate it. Also, one more thing.
Go ahead, I don't want to interrupt.
You go. I want to share the Signal group chat. The rule is you have to attend in person to get added to the Signal group chat. So I'll go make the QR code for that. Yeah.
Yeah, I just wanted to say, if anyone's ever interested in stopping by here during the week, we're a co-working space / campus for people to hang out and work together. If you want to come here like every day, we have memberships. If you want to come here a couple times a week, we have a much cheaper membership. You can find our website right here. There's a QR code, or you can look to sign up for a membership if you want to come by a couple days a week. Yeah, thanks for coming.
Awesome. Let's see, links. Let me. How do you get? Here we go. Group link. Copy. Make a QR code. And once you make that, launch the QR code. Nice. Should have used Grok.